Wizards just updated a nearly 10-year-old card type, and it significantly impacts every format in the game. Let's talk about the Final Fantasy Saga rules update. Judging by the Final Fantasy release notes, Wizards are going to be changing two Saga rules, Rule 714.3b and Rule 714.4. Let's start with Rule 714.4 and we'll come back to the other change later. Rule 714.4 states that when a saga has lore counters greater than or equal to the number of chapters it has, and that isn't from a source of a chapter ability, that saga's controller sacrifices it as a state-based action. This rule was most commonly applied in Modern, where players would have to sacrifice their Urza's Saga when there was a Blood Moon in play. The saga would become a mountain and lose all chapter abilities, which means their final chapter is 0, as per Rule 714.2d, and as per the current 714.4 rule, the saga would be sacrificed. This ruling was also significant for the upcoming saga creature summons from the Final Fantasy set. If you had one of these summons in play, and it either had its chapter ability countered by Tishana's Tidebinder, or text box swapped with Deadpool, or it simply saw a humility effect, you would have to sacrifice that creature, as again, it would lose all its chapter abilities. So what's happening with the rules update? At the time of recording, I only have the Final Fantasy release notes to go off, so there's no official rules wording as of yet. However, the article states that the change will be, if a saga has no chapter abilities, it won't be subject to the state-based action that would cause it to be sacrificed due to how many lore counters it has. In addition, sagas will now only gain lore counters after your draw step if they have chapter abilities. If they don't have any chapters, nothing will happen. The two biggest impacts here is that saga creatures will no longer be instantly sacrificed due to a Tishana's Tidebinder, Deadpool, or humility effect, and the most critical one is that Blood Moon is no longer a hard counter to Urza's Saga, and now it can actually make the saga even better. With the new rules, playing Blood Moon will simply change Urza's Saga to a mountain, and it won't be sacrificed. Also, if you had an Urza's Saga in play with two lore counters on it, so it had the ability to tap for a colorless, and the ability to pay 2, tap and create a construct token, and then your opponent played Blood Moon, Urza's Saga would keep those two abilities, and not only that, because Urza's Saga has no chapter abilities, it would no longer get lore counters each turn, which means it can stick around for multiple turns, generating construct tokens for just 2 mana. And this is all thanks to one thing: layers. Let's break this down step by step and walk through it. First, if we take a close look at Urza's Saga's chapter abilities, it says, this saga gains tap, add a colorless, and this saga gains pay 2, tap, create a construct. These two effects are two examples of Layer 6 continuous effects, adding and removing abilities. These abilities aren't naturally on the saga themselves, unlike some of the Final Fantasy summons that naturally have abilities like flying or haste. They're added as part of a continuous effect generated by a triggered ability of the saga. The easiest comparison would be to something like Chance of Glory, which says, creatures you control gain indestructible. You'll note that there's no duration tied to this effect. After the spell resolves, this is now a continuous effect that is applied to the creatures you currently have in play. And this is the same with Urza's Saga's abilities. They trigger, and then that continuous effect will be continually applied to the saga. If we look at Blood Moon, it has an ability that changes non-basic lands into mountains. This applies on Layer 4, type-changing effects. The lands that become mountains will effectively lose all their abilities that are printed in their text boxes. This is the important part. As per Rule 305.7, If an effect sets a land subtype to one or more of the basic land types, the land no longer has its old land type. It loses all abilities generated from its rules text, its old land types, and any copyable effects affecting that land. And it gains the appropriate mana ability for each new basic land type. Note that this does not remove any abilities that were granted to the land by other effects. So now let's break down what happens when we have a Blood Moon in play and an Urza Saga with 2 lore counters on it. So we have 3 continuous effects to apply, making all non-basic lands mountains, giving Urza Saga a mana ability, and giving Urza Saga the construct ability. We apply them in order of the layers list, starting at layer 4. Urza Saga becomes a mountain and loses all its rules text. Next, we jump to layer 6 and apply the mana ability and then the construct ability to the now Saga Mountain in timestamp order. Now, I know this is going to cause a bunch of comments to say, this doesn't make any sense. Well, welcome to layers. They don't always make sense intuitively, but this is how the rules of the game currently works. There is one example that might help this make sense. Let's say you have the new land, the Gold Saucer, in play, which has some abilities. Blood Moon then gets played, then Terra Eternal. Would the Gold Saucer have Indestructible? Most of you would say yes, because we apply the layers in the same order. We type change the Gold Saucer to be a mountain, and it will lose all of its printed text abilities. Then we apply Terra Eternal in layer 6, and it would gain Indestructible. The exact same thing is happening with Urza Saga and Blood Moon, but instead of having an enchantment that grants the ability adding the continuous effects, it was a chapter triggered ability. Okay, so if Blood Moon no longer stops Urza Saga, what can we do instead? Outside of destroying the land, we now have to target the Urza Saga at layer 6 and remove all its abilities there. Currently, there are 4 cards that can do this: Blood Sun, Alpine Moon, Lithoform Blight, and the new Final Fantasy card, Ultima, Origin of Oblivion. All 4 of these cards say the keywords, lose all abilities. Let's look at one of these effects in action, as they all work in practically the same way. Situation 1. There is an Urza Saga in play with 2 lore counters. You play Blood Sun. If we jump to the layers, we have 3 continuous effects that we want to apply on layer 6. And if you watched my previous videos on layers, you'll know, as per rule 613.7, we apply them in timestamp order, oldest to newest. So we apply the Amana ability first, then the Construct ability, and then the Blood Sun ability that makes Urza Saga lose all its abilities. Which means Urza Saga will lose the Construct ability and its chapter abilities. So while it will no longer gain any lore counters, it won't be able to make constructs. Situation 2, we have a Blood Sun in play and our opponent plays Urza Saga. This time around, Urza Saga will enter and nothing will happen because it has no abilities. It won't even get the first lore counter, so it won't even have the first chapter mana ability. As I mentioned, the other 3 cards play out in nearly the same way, although for Ultima and Lithoform Blight, only Situation 1 is relevant here. It's also worth noting that in Situation 1, Alpine Moon will remove the Urza Saga mana ability and replace it with tap, add 1 mana of any colour. Again, this is similar to Lithoform Blight and Ultima. So that's the rules change that is coming with the launch of the Final Fantasy set. What do you think? As always, if you learned something, be sure to like the video. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments down below, and subscribe, because if you don't, I'll tell wizards to make Blood Moon 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.